I hope I managed to summarize the gravity of the situation in that introduction. And I know you spend an awful lot of your time talking to people about what this means to real people, real lives, real families. So before we get into what you can do, tell us what climate breakdown means already to you and your people.
Thank you very much, and hello, everybody. Every time I get to talk about climate change, my team, gives me a whole list of things I have to talk about. But whenever I get on stage, I keep telling people, I come from a country where people have lived for over 2,000 years. We have our own culture.
Yeah.
We have our own language. We have our own script. Incidentally, we have contributed one word to the English language, and that's the word atoll. It comes from the Maldivian language, atoll.
As in a coral island.
Yes, it's a group of coral islands.
Yep.
And we come from, in history, we have on record that an envoy of Maldives visited Emperor Julian. So I come from that kind of culture. And here I am sitting and talking to everybody about a situation that in maybe even 50 years from now, there may not be an envoy here from Maldives talking about this. So this is where I come from.
And in practical terms, on a kind of daily, what do you observe? What is different now?
Several things, but the most obvious thing is about what's happening to the whole climate around the islands.
Yep.
Maldives have two seasons, traditionally, a wet season and a dry season. And our sailors use the currents, ocean currents, to travel around the Maldives. Those seasons are very, we have our own names and, ways of working them out. Now it's all gone.
Right.
We don't know when the wet season's going to come. We don't know when the dry season is going to come. And we see the beach erosions, we see the coral, dying, the coral reefs, just sort of dying in front of our eyes.
Yeah. And just put this in context, because we often talk about sea level rise. What is the highest point in the Maldives?
It's less than 2 meters.
So the margin for error here, it's wafer thin.
Absolutely. We have no high hills to retreat to. We have, on average, the highest point we have is basically 2 meters. That's our Mount Everest.
Your Mount Everest is 2 meters.
Yes.
That is what we're dealing with. We talk about mitigations. What can you do?
Well, what can the world do?
Perhaps a more important question.
When we're talking about mitigations, I can tell you what we do. We're transitioning from fossil fuel to solar.
Yeah.
Maldives lie on the equator, so solar is ideal. We don't have wind strong enough to have wind energy unless the technology develops. We don't have enough currents to have wave energy unless the technology develops. But solar is perfect.
Yeah.
So we are transitioning to solar. But Maldives is small. We are talking about 500,000 people there. Even if the whole country goes solar, it's not going to make an impact on what's happening around globally. So we come and make noise. We stand up and talk about the reality of what's happening in the Maldives to people like yourself so that you may go and do something about it.
What can people do?
Plenty of things. Number one, come to events like this, because you need to listen to us, the people who are experiencing this, and then go and spread the word. But what I would really like, and especially for young people, is I go and talk to universities quite a bit. I tell them, look, it's wonderful that you are here and that you are eco-warriors, you're conscious about the environment, but that isn't enough. We need you at the top of your government. We need you to go up the corporate ladder and become the CEOs of the companies, of the big emitters. We need you to be the prime ministers and presidents and MPs of the countries that are big emitters. That is where we need you to be.
And lower down the kind of food chain, so to speak. What about the tourism industry? What can they do?
That is a really difficult question for me.
Yeah.
You know,
Because you're massively dependent.
we are dependent on tourism for survival.
Yeah.
We have two industries, fishing and tourism. Just to quickly talk about the fishing, we fish one by one. In Maldives, traditionally, we don't use nets. And by law, it's prohibited. We don't purse seine, we don't troll net. The only way you can fish in the Maldives is one by one. But tourism is our big industry. And of course, aircrafts are one of the biggest carbon emitters. So I tell scientists, develop one that can fly on any other renewable energy so that we can survive. But if you look at the tourism industry as a whole, the industry itself is wonderful, Keme. A lot of the resorts, they have their own, solar energy. Some of the resorts are planning to become zero emission by 2030. I mean, let me give you some examples of, because it's worth talking about.
Yeah.
For example, resorts such as Six Senses, Lamu, and Sonevafushi, they are pioneers in eco-tourism, tourism sector in the Maldives. And they have sustainable waste management, organic gardens, and of course the Ba Atoll UNESCO biosphere. They have coral conservation. So the tourism industry as a whole, they have taken this thing in their hands because they also know they need to survive.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it is a threat to them as well, not just the people of Maldives. So we have all the big hotel chains out there in the Maldives. And I'm really happy to say that they are doing their bit.
Yeah, and you talked about some of the kind of waste management technologies. Some of the innovations that you are coming up with are actually useful for all of us. So, what have you learned that you can share with the rest of the world about cutting edge thinking in this field?
One of the biggest challenges that we have in the Maldives is plastic.
Yeah.
And some of this plastic is not something that we generate. As I just said, we only use pole and line method of fishing, but Indian Ocean is a huge ocean, and we have other countries fishing, and so the ghost gear or the fishing gear is something
stuff that's left
there that floats into the Maldives. So we have young fishermen, and it's a beautiful story because these initiatives are taken up by young fishermen, and it happened during COVID lockdown when a lot of these young men who worked in the tourism industry were laid off or furloughed because the whole country went into lockdown because of COVID.
Yeah.
So they went back to their islands and they started taking up fishing.
Yep.
And they found out that they are coming across all these plastic ghost gear and things. So they came up with a plan to deal with it. One of that group came to me as High Commissioner and said, is there anything you can do to help us, A, do something with this plastic, and secondly, encourage the older fishermen or the people who are not very familiar with the dangers of plastic, how to educate them. So with the UK government's assistance and the Commonwealth, we are at the moment running an educational training program for them so that they can go out and train the rest of the fishing industry to deal with that.
And this process is useful for other coastal communities around the world.
Absolutely. I think it's encouraging and young people to take up these roles because they are really the ones who are going to suffer.
Yeah. Dr. Faizal, we're honoured to have you here. We've got time for a couple of questions, and hopefully we've got a microphone. I'm going to scan who's going to get their hand up. Anyone got a question for the High Commissioner? If we can get a microphone there, fifth row back, thank you very much.
Thank you. Lorinda Luffman, RSPB. Thank you so much for your talk. I actually watched a Simon Reeves programme last night where he was looking at Spanish fishermen doing a very similar thing, where the young fishermen were taking plastic out of the ocean and it was then being recycled into high-value shoes and clothes. I wonder, obviously Maldives probably doesn't have any manufacturing on the islands, but could the plastic that they're collecting be used in that way in the fashion industry?
Thank you. We actually have certain NGOs, Parley is one of them, who are working on these issues. I think some of the shoes or the plastic that gets collected in the Maldives have been used by Adidas to make some of their shoes. But what the young fishermen in the Maldives are trying to do is use that plastic to make something that is done in the Maldives and can be, the 100% the profit can come to the Maldives. So that is the, something that they've taken one step further on that.
Time for one more. One more. The bids are in. And the microphone over here, please. Thank you very much indeed.
Hi. You mentioned that tourism is a really important part of the Maldives. For people that may think about going on holiday to the Maldives, how much of their money is going back into your communities, and what does that economic divide look like?
Sorry, I didn't quite hear.
So for people that are lucky enough to go on vacation to the Maldives, how much of the money stays in the Maldives and is available for local communities? Is that a correct?
Well, tourism is our mainstay. So I want to encourage all of you to come and visit us.
There's an invitation right there. You heard it.
Because that's what puts the food on the table for the whole country. Because when Maldives locked down from a middle-income country, which we have become because of tourism, we went into a zero-income country overnight for those 3 months when we locked down. So it does stay in the country. It does, and the resorts are very careful that, with the islands nearby where the people live, they encourage them to participate and help them out. So that's there. But the other thing the government does is there is a green tax, which every tourist pay, which we use again for adaptation and other measures.
Well, I'm sure I join everybody in this room in Bristol in hoping that we find a way through this, because there are some countries around the world where climate breakdown is existential. The Maldives is one. The High Commissioner from the Maldives to the UK, Dr. Farah Faizal.
Thank you. Thank you very much.